Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your cooperation to get here so quickly because as you know, we're going to stream the event and therefore there are certain rules. First of all, please adhere to all COVID rules and regulations. Secondly, on the streaming. If you need to smoke or use the bathroom, it's at the back right. Please don't use the facilities down here because we need to keep the line between the camera and the microphone open. No smoking on the balcony, otherwise everybody will go out there. The speakers, please don't touch the microphone. And even if the speakers are so forcefully motivational, please don't run up to the speakers and touch the microphone. That is for the audience, you know, just calm down. You're welcome. Mine is obviously not to welcome you primary, but I want to thank, in recognition, the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung, who made it possible for us, Echo Media, Media on Demand, as well as Brenda, Sonia, and Jill from the foundation. Usually we forget them, and that is not necessary because they work very hard to make sure that we are here. If I welcome you on behalf of the FW de Klerk Foundation, I'm not doing it on my own behalf. I welcome you on behalf of the speakers who will speak tonight. I will introduce each and every one of you. And who are not on the program tonight is Dr. Warren Cleelo, as well as Jeanette de Klerk Luttig. I saw her here. Thank you, Jeanette. Mrs. Christina Teichmann. I saw you here. There you are. And Professor Francois Venter, who is in Potchefstroom. It's a little distance from here, but most probably the stream will get there the day after tomorrow. And then you will know that we also represented him. Yes, and Lucky Matabula will do the thanks at the end, so I cannot mention him now and at the end, you know. He's not BEE, he's just one of us. We are here to remember and to celebrate. If we only remember, we will be very sad because it's less than 60 days that we lost our friend and our leader and our husband. And if we think about his life, we might be sad. But if we celebrate what he left behind in terms of the foundation, we have lots of reason to celebrate. And that is the focus of tonight. We want to celebrate. For that, we invited a number of keynote speakers. You will be introduced to them, and I'm not going to mention their names, but I will introduce each and every one of them to you. I want to start with Dr. Holger Dix of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Thank you very much, sir, and we're ready to listen to you. Please.
I can take my mask off. I'm vaccinated 3 times, so it should be fine. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. It's a pleasure for me to be here amongst you today and speak as interim director of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Some of you might know me as the former resident representative of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation in South Africa. So please don't panic. I'm not back. I'm just the interim resident representative. The foundation did send me back to South Africa in order to run a new project on political dialogue with Sub-Saharan Africa. Henning Suhr, whom you know certainly, the former resident representative, is in Germany now, and we're waiting now for the new one. So I'm doing just the job of the interim. But let me say that during my term as resident representative from 2012 to 2016, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation and FW de Klerk Foundation had a very intense cooperation. Not only every second February, our common activity, which was really something outstanding, but our work with the Center for Constitutional Rights. I have to say that all these events with the FW de Klerk Foundation were always highlights in the work of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and for me personally, as the res rep of the Konrad Adenauer Foundation. Let me say from the beginning, the Konrad Adenauer Foundation did not always agree with all the statements made by FW de Klerk Foundation, but I have to say that a partnership has to be able to stand up from time to disagreements as well. But for us, our cooperation with your foundation has always been a place to meet impressive people. It has always been a place for very intensive exchange on sometimes complicated topics. We as CAS have always admired the foundation's courage to take up conflictual topics. You cannot, and that is my personal conviction, you cannot avoid difficult topics. You have to seek a dialogue on difficult issues with sometimes difficult people if you want to move the country forward. So far, the FW de Klerk Foundation has very often managed to bring people together who are looking for solutions to problems that exist in South Africa as a whole, and who are looking for what unites the society and not what divides the society. I'm therefore pleased to be back today here at the FW de Klerk Foundation. I would have loved to meet FW de Klerk again after we said goodbye in December 2016 over a very pleasant lunch we had in Stellenbosch at the end of my mandate. So allow me to make one personal remark. When you're representing the Konrad Adenauer Foundation somewhere in the world, you have the privilege of meeting from time to time very high-ranking people. However, the meetings and discussions I had with FW de Klerk were always extraordinary for me, because there was not too much protocol involved, and because he didn't give me the impression that I'm talking to a former president and a Nobel Prize laureate, but that I'm talking to someone who's deeply concerned about the future of his country, and instead of only complaining, who was ready to use his experience, his resources, and his network to identify solutions to problems. And there are some problems in South Africa. I think we can agree on that. We are all aware that FW's passing on means a deep cut in the work of the FW de Klerk Foundation. You will now, and you started already, have to think very carefully about what the future mandate of the foundation can and should be. And today, I'm sure we're going to learn about your ideas on the future role of your foundation. I'd like to express the hope that the FW de Klerk Foundation will continue to work successfully in the future. On the one hand, to keep the memory of this extraordinary person alive, but also to continue to deal with the topics that were important to him, to make a contribution to a peaceful, prosperous future in South Africa. As an interim res rep, I'm not allowed to make promises on our cooperation, but let me say I would love to see FW de Klerk Foundation and the Konrad Adenauer Foundation to continue their work. You did a very strategic choice in inviting Christina Teichmann on the board of the foundation. She knows the Konrad Adenauer Foundation very well. She still has a very good access to the Konrad Adenauer Foundation, and she knows how to use it. So I'm quite confident that our relations will still be very good. I wish you all the best for your future work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Diggs. I think you will agree with me that he opened the floor with a welcoming remark from Konrad Adenauer, who worked together with the FW de Klerk Foundation, celebrating today the 32nd anniversary of Mr. de Klerk's speech on the 2nd of February 1990. And that's why we are here. We're celebrating one of the historic events. As Dr. Diggs also indicated, the foundation has to go back to its paperwork, to its table, to its files, to its structures, its history, and its experience, to see what the future will hold for the foundation. And therefore, I'm going to ask our chairperson, Mr. Dave Stewart, to make a few remarks on the meeting that we had today. Thank you, Dave.
Good evening. We are not. It's a great pleasure for me to welcome you to the Foundation's new home. And I wish to acknowledge right at the beginning the fact that Elita de Klerk raised the funds for this lovely building in record time. Elita, you are a champion. You're a star. The message of our get-together tonight is that FW de Klerk may no longer be with us, but the legacy continues. And we believe that one of the greatest aspects of that legacy is the constitutional transformation of South Africa. Between 1990, culminating in our present constitution in 1996, undoubtedly, this was the greatest thing that we South Africans did in our long and troubled history. We astounded the world. The world was looking for a cataclysm in South Africa. Many South Africans believed the same. But we showed that when we come together, when we sit around a table and work rationally together, we can solve any problem. We believe that one of the greatest ways that the foundation can now preserve FW's legacy is to publicize this great constitutional transformation process. So we intend to establish here a Center for the Constitutional Transformation of South Africa to tell the story of this wonderful chapter in our history. How did we move from the chaos, the hopelessness of 1985, when the only light in the tunnel was the oncoming train? How did we move from that situation of absolute hopelessness to the dawn of 1990, the first glimmers of light, and then to the full rising of the sun of a new non-racial constitution in December 1996. We think all South Africans should know this story, but nobody's telling it. So that's what we want to do in this building. We want to explain how we moved from those dark days. What were the factors that made it possible for us as South Africans to find one another? The agreement that we reached with the Cubans and the Angolans in 1988 that led to the withdrawal of Soviet-supported forces from Angola, the independence of Namibia. The fact that by 1987 all parties had agreed that there would not be a revolutionary or an armed outcome to the problem. The fact that on the 9th of November 1989, the Berlin Wall came tumbling down. And de Klerk realized that the time would never again be so propitious to start a constitutional negotiation process as at that moment. So, 32 years ago, he removed every single obstacle to talks. He opened the door to negotiations. He invited the ANC in. But as we all know, it was a very, very tumultuous period. We were plagued with violence from all sides. We established the National Peace Accord, the Goldstone Commission. Finally, this led to the start of the CODESA negotiations. If you look at the declaration of intent at the beginning of CODESA, it's pretty close to what we got in the end in 1996 and in 1993. How those talks were organized, how the thing was put together, what progress was made, and a great deal of progress was made before CODESA II collapsed in June 1992. And then we had a situation where we had rolling mass action, the Leipzig option. It seemed as though South Africa was on the way to chaos. We were approaching the precipice at Bishu. And then, I think, sanity returned to all parties. We had the record of understanding. The ANC came back into the talks. The IFP left. We then had the National Negotiating Forum in 1993, which then hammered out, on the basis of CODESA II, the outlines of our 1993 constitution. But there were so many crises in between. There was the assassination of Chris Hani. There was the invasion of the World Trade Center by the AWB. And then a little island of light and hope. De Klerk and Mandela got the Nobel Peace Prize on the 10th of December 1993. We adopted our new constitution. We had a roller coaster ride down to the 27th of April, invasions in Maputo, Tswana, the IFP not coming on board. It's a great story. And it culminated... No problem. No problem. And it culminated in December, on the 16th of December 1996, in the adoption of our new constitution. And that constitution, we believe, is the DNA of our new society. And this is the process that we want to commemorate. We want to make sure that this story goes out not only in our little exhibition, but on the internet. We want this to be a home for that constitutional transformation process. We want to use our center also as a place where we can continue with our main work of defending and promoting the Constitution. So this is the legacy that we wish to preserve in this building. The message goes out tonight. FW de Klerk is no longer with us, but his legacy remains. And the legacy is in Section 1 of our Constitution, in our foundational values. Our challenge is to make those values a reality for all South Africans. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I think it was a very good summary of a 4-hour-long meeting today. Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we have some of the directors, board members of the Board of Directors, for their looks. Others are there for their status. And then we have Judge Farlam. To represent wisdom and leadership. I think all of you who knows Just Farlam will recognize him as one of those pillars in society. Wherever he goes, there's order. And we requested him to bring some of that order within the historic processes that we went through to bring it to you tonight. Judge, can I assist you? No. Remember not to storm the microphone.
No, I won't storm the microphone. Thank you. Thank you for your kind words. When I heard you say some of the things about me, I remember what Archbishop Ramsey said when he retired. There's a function in his honor, and the person who spoke about him dwelt on his merits very substantially. And he got up and he said, as I heard the speech, I wanted to pray for forgiveness. Forgiveness for the speaker, forgiveness for myself. Forgiveness for the speaker for all the untrue things he said, for myself for enjoying them so much. Now, I'm sure that all of you here tonight would agree with the proposition enunciated by President Franklin Delano Roosevelt that presidential papers are an important part of the national heritage, and they should be accessible to the public. And that this is particular, and you'd agree, I think, also, that this is particularly true in the case of FW de Klerk's papers. He was the one who took, as we heard earlier, took and implemented the important decisions which fundamentally changed South Africa. Now, in the United States, there are 13 presidential libraries. The first one was established with the papers of President Hoover. Thereafter, of course, Roosevelt, all the way through to George Bush Jr. They are administered by the Office of Presidential Libraries, which is part of the National Archives and Records Administration of the United States, and they are repositories for preserving and making available the papers, records, and other historical records, collections, and other historical materials of each president from Hoover onwards to George Bush. In addition to the library services, museum exhibitions concerning the presidency are displayed. I told you that because that's where we essentially got the main idea for the FW de Klerk archives and library. Because we propose, as my duty to tell you tonight, we propose to establish, we've already taken some preliminary steps, establish a library and archives on the lines of the American presidential libraries. I want to tell you something about what we're going to get, and we hope to get more of, and we hope that any of you who are here have documents in your possession which throw light upon aspects of the life and work of FW de Klerk. If you could make them available to us, either the original if necessary, or if you want to keep the original copies, because it's very important that scholars should be able to assemble biographies of de Klerk which deal very accurately and very fully with his life, his character, and his achievements. Now, our objective is going to be to assemble a corpus of digital and hard copy information, videos, films, recordings, and photographs on FW de Klerk and the constitutional transformation process that will provide an authoritative study database for future scholars, and it will preserve and provide universal access to core information on him and the constitutional transformation of South Africa. The idea is to establish the archive here so that scholars can come from wherever and work here with all this material readily available to them. We also want to digitize and provide internal internet access to this information. And also we want to have a small library of books and publications on and relating to him and the constitutional transformation. Now, the databases from which the archive will draw will include digital information relating to his speeches and statements during his presidency, digital information regarding his role as executive deputy president, also on his role as chairman and chairman emeritus of this foundation, and his very important work as chairman of the Global Leadership Foundation, I think eyes will open very wide when they see all the things that the Global Leadership Foundation did all over the world, where countries were in trouble, and it was important that senior statesmen could come below the radar and give meaningful advice which could sort things out. And it happened many, many times, but up to now, it's still remained under the radar. Also notes of conversations between Mr. de Klerk and the world leaders and prominent political figures, speeches and statements he made after his retirement from politics, the manuscript of his autobiography, and books from the personal library of people such as David Stewart and others, which also throw light on the matters which will be covered by the library. And we also want information and documentation relating to his family, childhood and youth. One of the things I looked at today was some collection of cuttings and documents which were produced in a very beautifully bound volume from his old university, which included things like his school reports, all sorts of other essays he wrote as a schoolboy. So they really started at the beginning, and of course it goes right the way through. And they also, we want to have videos of his speeches and interviews, and video material relating to his career, and photographs of his life, career, and again, the constitutional transformation process. We also would like to get from the state archives and from the Archive of Contemporary Affairs at the University of the Free State copies of the documents they have, which would be needed by scholars who wish to work on the life and achievements of FW de Klerk. We will have to procure the services of an archivist, librarian, to assist us with the establishment and maintenance of the archive, to classify the documents and make them readily accessible. I had a very fascinating half an hour earlier today when I was introduced to some of the documents that we have. And I took 3 documents which I thought some of you might find interesting. The first is a letter dated 13th of January 1993, written by George Bush Sr. from the White House. Dear Mr. President, as I prepare to leave office, I wanted to write and express my appreciation for the relationship you and I have established together. The world has undergone dramatic changes since I became president 4 years ago, and the transformation of South Africa is certainly one of the most vivid and significant. I believe that our joint efforts have contributed to the tremendous progress that has been achieved. However, the primary credit belongs to you. Your courageous efforts in South Africa to overcome apartheid and to establish a new non-racial dispensation have earned you the respect and admiration of the American people. The release of Nelson Mandela from prison, the repeal of apartheid legislation, and the beginning of meaningful negotiations over South Africa's future captured the imagination of the world. It's been a pleasure and a privilege to work with you. I'll always recall the delightful visit you made to the White House. And then he goes on to say, although much still needs to be done, I'm confident that that you and your countrymen will quickly overcome the remaining obstacles and take the final steps needed to achieve a new democratic form of government for South Africa. Barbara joins me in sending warm greetings to you, Mrs. de Klerk. Sincerely, George Bush. And the next letter is a letter written after her retirement is probably the wrong word. I suppose expulsion from office is more appropriate. Written by the Right Honourable Margaret Thatcher, OMFRS, on the 19th of March 1982. Dear State President, I send you my warmest personal congratulations on the outcome of your referendum. The result far exceeded my most optimistic hopes and demonstrates most forcibly that fortune favours the brave and the visionary. A very distinguished predecessor of mine, and I'm sure you'll all recognise from the quote who that distinguished predecessor was, a very distinguished predecessor of mine once said, but certain events marked the end of the beginning rather than the beginning of the end. Without your courage, the latter might well have become a reality, whereas most thankfully it is now the former, which will form the basis for moving forward to an equitable and prosperous future for South Africa. With warm personal regards from us both to you both, yours sincerely, Margaret Thatcher. And then the other document is not dated, but it's obviously sometime in 1991. Dear State President, by the time you receive this message, You will already have heard this morning's announcements from 10 Downing Street of my decision to make way for a successor. I don't know whether a similar decision is on the way from one of her successors, but that's not a matter you need to worry about. My decision to make way for a successor and to resign as Prime Minister as soon as the parliamentary party has completed the necessary procedures for electing a new leader. I shall, of course, remain in charge of the government until my successor has been appointed. I should like to thank you for the great cooperation and friendship which you have shown to me during our time together in office, during which so much has been achieved. And I send you my warmest good wishes for the future. I know that my successor will continue to attach the highest importance to the relations between our countries. And we know that her successor did take a major role in that regard. The final thing I want to say is that our resources will inevitably fall far short of those available in the United States. As a result, our archive will be on a much smaller scale, but it will encompass core information essential for the understanding of FW's career and his role in the constitutional transformation of South Africa. And I'm sure you will join me in looking forward to the creation of this library and to be able to enjoy the benefit of the researches of those who use it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Judge Farlam. We appreciate. You know, with the cooperation of the speakers, we started 5 minutes late and we are now 5 minutes ahead. Before I introduce our next speaker, I just want to mention, Judge Farlam mentioned that we would like to have some documents from your side, also for this library. And he sent me this note, specially signed cash checks from Dr. Wiese. Is that what you meant?
I'm afraid the banks were honoured the check.
Yeah, well, you know.
Anything connected with an international company.
Yes, yes.
They changed their practices.
Bitcoin, a number of Bitcoins, you know, just put it in the box when you go. Ladies and gentlemen, it's no use referring to the challenges that Dave referred to during CODESA without referring to the solutions. And yes, there were many problems, but there were at that stage young, creative politicians who opened the door, who pushed open the door and sometimes kicked open the door. One of them was Mr. Rolf Meyer. And so we invited him tonight to come and speak to us, not only as one of those who saved the CODESA process and who saved the negotiations and who made sure that we got to the point where the speech of the 2nd of February 1990 came to its fullest meaning. Therefore, we are honored by the presence of Mr. Rolf Meyer. Rolf, thank you for coming down. Thank you for accepting our invitation. And there are many things that are mentioned on the program. Many things that are mentioned on the program. What I want to maybe mention that is not on the program is that Rolf and Mr. de Klerk were friends for more than 50 years. And I'm not mentioning that to give away your age. I'm just saying that you were friends for a very, very long time. Rolf, we look forward to listen to you.
Thank you. Good to see you. Thank you very much, or Master of Ceremonies, I should say. Thank you very much for welcoming me here. Chairperson of the Foundation, Deputy Chairperson of the Foundation, ladies and gentlemen, looking at all the former politicians here, I should say colleagues. It's wonderful to be here, and thank you very much for this opportunity. Michelle, my wife, and I are extremely privileged and honored to be in Cape Town. We are still based in Pretoria, in Gauteng, unlike all of you. So for us to get here is a mission. It doesn't happen every day, but wonderful to be here. Thank you for the invitation, Elita. I was very hesitant, I must admit, to accept the invitation to come and speak. For a number of reasons. The one is, like I say, we are not based in this part of the country. The second is probably the fact that I was never aligned closely with the foundation. And I never intended to be, and FW, I think, didn't see me as part of the foundation. So it was like a new experience for me when you say, or invited me to come and speak. But two reasons convinced me. The one is the fact that I'm starting to get one of the few left of that period. And therefore, I suppose one has to make a contribution and speak out about it. When you talk about Judge receiving documentation, etc., I was thinking immediately, I was present the day that FW received a call from the late senior Bush president. I was present when he received that call to congratulate him on the release of President Mandela and the steps that were initiated on the 2nd of February. And maybe what we should do and offer from our side is to actually make some podcasts about our memories of that period. I think that could be a valuable contribution. So that is the one reason what made me decided I'm one of the few left of that period. The second is the fact that I had a very emotional and intimate experience during October last year when I heard about the fact that FW was reaching the last phase. I immediately decided I want to come and say goodbye. And that was a very, very special moment, and I want to thank Elita for the fact that she enabled me to come, because it was really the last few weeks. And Chris Vismer, my former colleague, I invited to come along, and the two of us had a very special 1 hour with FW, during which we could share our memories in a brief moment. I could thank him for the fact that he appointed me to do what I did. If it wasn't for that, I would have played no role in the negotiations, or a far lesser role. I could say to him that it was special to be close to him and to walk the mile with him at all given stages, and I will come back to that. So it was an emotional experience, and a very intimate one, and I think that is what finally persuaded me to stand here this evening to say a few words. So I want to thank Elita for that, and to say that it is special to continue in a certain way, also the road that we have traveled before, but with you in person continuing from here. And may I just add, at the same time when I left the room after the final goodbye to FW, and it's an amazing thing, and I wish all of us can do that from time to time when it happens, when you reach that point, to say goodbye to somebody knowing that it's the last time. And that was very, very special. It was my moment of mourning, almost started there. But I would like to say to Elita what you said that day after we said goodbye to FW was your intention to stay in South Africa. And I'm very impressed with that. You have many choices. And the fact that you wanted to stay here, made that decision, and continue with the work of the foundation is inspirational to me. Thank you for that. The South African dialogue, negotiations, and constitution-making process has been very well documented by numerous sources. FW's role and his contribution have been covered not only by him in his writings, in his speeches, and presentations, but also in about every book on the subject. I became aware of that when I was doing a little bit of preparations for this event today. The way in which it was covered and is covered. So This will be an additional collection to that record that already exists. It will, however, be most appropriate to locate his personal and other material in this building. I had the opportunity last week, incidentally, to visit the Nelson Mandela Foundation offices in Johannesburg. So next time, when you travel up north, if it happens from time to time, I would like to suggest that you make a visit to the Nelson Mandela Foundation. I was quite impressed. I haven't been there for 10 years or more. And the way in which the memories and the work of Mandela was captured there, I think, is quite impressive. And immediately I said to myself, I would like to see the same for FW in this space. And I think this creates a wonderful opportunity to do so. And the fact that you've established yourself as a foundation in this house, I think, is a great opportunity to look forward as South Africans and as visitors from abroad to visit this future FW de Klerk museum, as I hope it will be. What South Africans achieved during the time of the transition, and many of you who are present here were part of that exercise. That exercise of transition from apartheid to democracy still remains a benchmark for the world. To prove that, and I just want to elaborate a little bit in terms of my personal experience as far as that is, we established a little institution in 2013 called In Transformation Initiative, through which we are sharing the South African experience with others in conflict around the world. Presently, right now, as I speak, we are working in 8 different countries, doing that, exactly that, sharing the South African experience. And previously, we've done it in a dozen more, starting in Northern Ireland, where Owen Fallon was very directly involved at the time. For instance, I'm talking about 1994 and immediately after. And in all these experiences, sharing the South African experience, the one thing that struck me every time is the fact that the South African experience is being held as a benchmark to the rest of the world. From negotiations, or rather from talks about talks, dialogue, negotiations, and constitution making right to the end. There's not a single example in modern history that equals this at all. And I can say it because I'm working in this space now for an indefinite period. That's the fact that South Africa transited from apartheid to democracy peacefully remains a miracle, even 28 years later, or since it happened. Not since recent history was recorded, or have been recorded. One can find a similar case anywhere in the world of transition from apartheid, from an authoritarian style of government to a democratic one, anywhere in the world in a smooth and peaceful way. It was, however, not a miracle, but rather a divine guidance, I believe. And the reason I'm saying so is for a number of years prior to 1990, the same conditions for change prevailed, undoubtedly so. P.W. Botha had the opportunity to open the gates to democracy, but he didn't do so already in 1985. The so-called expected Rubicon speech. In fact, from many perspectives, it would have been a much better time then to start the process of change. And as we all can recall who were part of that period, when the Rubicon moment didn't happen, then domestic unrest immediately escalated to new levels and the country became ungovernable. I often say to my ANC friends, they intended to make the country ungovernable during that period, and they succeeded in doing that. The result was a national state of emergency for 5 years. We mustn't underestimate the impact of that. Nowhere in the world we've seen the similar thing in recent times. So From the period of 1986 onwards to 1990, it was the most terrible years of apartheid ever. And Dave referred to it just now. At the same time, the international community intensified their mobilization against South Africa on a bilateral basis, but also on a multilateral basis. And it culminated in the US Sanctions Act of 1986, of which Warren can justify the impact, I'm quite sure. My experience in visiting, and I still can't, I don't know yet, or still don't know why I did it, but I was convinced by some business people from Johannesburg at the time, as a young parliamentarian, National Party parliamentarian, to go to the US Congress in 1986 to try and convince the Senate not to adopt the Sanctions Act of that year. It was in July of that year, and I went across and managed to meet with a variety of senators, all from the Republican side, of course, because they were in control of the Senate at that stage. I met with Luger, who was chair of the African subcommittee in the Senate, with Nancy Kassebaum, with Strom Furman, who was almost 90 years old already at that stage, Jesse Helms, and a few others. And I tried to convince them to say, South Africa is heading for change. Don't now adopt this Sanctions Act. It would hurt the people. They all said to me the same thing. You have had your chance. You didn't prove to us that you're going to make the changes, so we have to hit you hard. And so the Sanctions Act came, and it actually hit us very hard. But that is in that perspective, like Dave was saying, that we have to take into account what the role was, what FW contributed in terms of making and leading the change. FW, I think, was a Democrat. Unlike his predecessor, he didn't follow the security route. Much has been written and debated about his approach to the fundamentals of democracy, and it will remain a debate for some time. I don't have to justify what he did, because I think it speaks for itself. The one thing I can say, however, today, is that serving under him during the period that led to the transition in 1994 as Minister of Constitutional Affairs and leading the constitutional negotiations was an absolute honor and a privilege for me. He was a true principal and leader that guided us and gave us all the support to realize a peaceful transition. It was not always easy. David Welsh, in his book, The Rise and Fall of Apartheid, wrote inter alia the following. In the 4 turbulent years after the 2nd of February 1990, the relationship between de Klerk and Mandela would go through rocky passages, sometimes appearing to push the country to the brink of civil war. Sometimes it was completely held through the actions of both men. Both men recognized that the other was a vital partner. Mandela realized that de Klerk was the only white leader who could take the white population out of the corner into which apartheid had painted themselves. And de Klerk realized that Mandela's towering authority would be vital to keeping the volatility of the masses within bounds. So the roles of the two leaders were magnificent. One of the most significant contributions made by FW was his insistence, in my mind, that there shall be a constitutional continuum from the old to the new. It's something that is not often mentioned in terms of recognizing his role. He preferred to call it, there should be no constitutional hiatus. His point was that we should have prevented a constitutional vacuum, a stage when there would have been no constitution. That view, and of course that was a possibility that this could happen, but that view was confirmed in the Record of Understanding of September of '92. There it was agreed by him and Mandela that we shall have a constitutional continuum. Accordingly, The apartheid constitution was terminated at midnight on the 26th of April 1994 and followed by the interim constitution, which lasted until the final constitution of 1996 commenced. History will speak clearly, irrespective of what current views might be. Let us not try to predict what that outcome might be, but make sure that the records are kept for generations to come. All I can say, it's okay. All I can say on the subject now is that FW's role as a peacemaker is well established internationally and beyond our shores. His willingness, and maybe this is one of his biggest contributions of all time compared to others, his willingness to contribute to a peaceful settlement in South Africa by voluntarily relinquishing power has no other example in modern times. South Africa today, turning to the current moment, has many new challenges before us, not unlike the previous stages. We have the big challenges of apartheid, of poverty, of unemployment, resulting in inequality. These issues have been registered for too long now and neglected by most, either at government level or in civil society or in business. We can't face it any longer. In fact, since 1994, we had the opportunity to address these. All of those were imperatives implied in the Constitution of 1996 and even in the interim Constitution. If we look at the prescripts of the Chapter 2 set of fundamental rights, all of these had to be attended to in the time that passed. It doesn't help us now to judge whether it's the Constitution that is at failure with this. Many voices are raised, and the point is, I think, it's not the Constitution that is at failure. It is those that didn't do their jobs since the change of democracy happened in 1994. Unless we do the necessary now, I think we are heading for big problems in South Africa, let alone at the political level, but also at the social level. Jointly, in my mind, it means all of government, political parties, business, labor organizations, and particularly civil society have to join hands. Here potentially lies an opportunity also for this foundation to work together in conjunction with others in civil society or in non-governmental structures to find practical implementation and solutions to resolve also this crisis in our current situation. More than anything else, I think we have to apply our minds. We can talk a lot about reconciliation, about social cohesion, but if people are suffering at the scale that they're currently doing in South Africa, reconciliation and social cohesion means nothing. And it's practical. It's all about the economy. Recent surveys, and there's a survey that I'm aware of that is going to be published very soon, indicates that South Africa is at a big challenge as far as this is. And it all relates, the inequality gap, poverty, unemployment, all relates back to the state of the economy. And again, we will have to, through deeds, come back to the question of how can we address this. We can talk a lot, many words have been expressed, but if government and other sectors of our society can't commit themselves to bring about actual deeds, we're going to see an escalation of this problem. What happened last year in July, to my mind, is just a sign of the volcano that will erupt on an ongoing basis and regularly. and it will be bigger and bigger. So I'm saying, to my mind, it's not a political problem in the first instance. Although we can all mention what we observe at the political level. The reality is the economy has to give satisfactory answers to this challenge. So the question is, what considerations comes up? I've tried to list a few, and I open this for further debate and questions on going forward. But I leave it here also for the foundation to consider in terms of its future role, based on the legacy of FW. The first is the fact that the economic model for a democratic South Africa was never appropriately considered. And one can blame ourselves, those that were negotiating the Constitution, for not applying our minds, or we can blame the then government that took over and became the democratic elected government. The reality is the economic model for South Africa, democratic South Africa, was never properly considered at a large scale. Second consideration. Accordingly, the implementation questions around socioeconomic rights in the Constitution were not addressed by the people who drafted the Constitution. I'm saying to myself, maybe Cyril and I should have applied our minds as part of our job at the time. Maybe we were too much in a hurry to get away from the scene, finishing the job of the Constitution and then leave it to others, leave it to the government and others to consider that question. The reality is the problem bites us today, and it's now 28 years later, and we have to find answers for where we stand today with regard to the problem. All of this left a vacuum, and a socio-economic transformation lagged and didn't follow the constitutional transition of the country. So there's a gap, and that vacuum still exists. Today, the consequences are visible in terms of poverty, in terms of unemployment, and in terms of specifically inequality, impacting on the vast majority of South Africans. I have to remind you, as we sit here, we are representative of a small, minuscule percentage of the population as part of the white elite. And we can't tolerate this any longer. We have to apply our minds as to what are we going to do next. Today, the consequences are visible, and therefore the current solution for this situation is limited to uncoordinated and divergent policy positions, and the lack of implementation contributes further to the problem. Lack of implementation of government policies. Let me use one example. Land reform has been an imperative in the Constitution right from the start. Section 25 provides for land reform right from the start. But actual implementation of those provisions never took place in the way it was intended by the Constitution makers. We have to get back to those questions, and we can celebrate the fact that the ANC was not able to pass the amendments to the Constitution through Parliament in the course of last year. That doesn't take us any further in resolving the question of what do we do in fact about land reform. So my view on this is that instead we need a fundamental overhaul of the economic model of the country, looking at where we find ourselves, look at other examples that have been successful in the rest of the world, including the German model, that have survived two big challenges, or actually came out of a big challenge after World War II, and then survived the unification and produced the most productive country and successful country in Europe. Models like that we have to consider in our own approach as far as finding the answers. Second last consideration, I think, is the fact that we will have to consider the possibility of calling together representatives, like I said earlier, of all concerned, on the basis of what we have experienced at the time of CODESA. I don't want to say this is an economic CODESA. Clem Santa raised that possibility 15 years ago, but the name never would suit, so forget about the name. The point is a convention of politicians, of government, of business, of labor, and of civil society. People like you and I, who are sitting here, should be established to look at the real challenge and bringing up the answers. The resources are there. South Africans are clever enough if we challenge the effort and the energy in the right direction. So lastly, my point would be, I think we have to combine our efforts and look at who and how we can bring people together that can take the lead in this. But the very last point is, it has to be the next generation. It can't be those of us who were part and parcel of the previous exercise. It has to be people from this generation that has the future ahead of them. I keep on asking myself the question, if Cyril and I were responsible to lead the process as we did from the respective sides, and Tony was there and many others, Colin and so many others, but the reality is Cyril and I were fairly young at that stage. He was not even 40 and I was just past 40 when we had to take that responsibility. Where are the 40-year-olds today to take that lead and to apply the same energy, commitment, and dedication to achieve what is now required? So I leave it with you as foundation, also to take up this challenge, because I don't think it's a challenge that we can just put aside. And in the very last instance, I wish this foundation well in what you've established here. I think it's a great future for the foundation. The legacy of FW is there, but it's behind us. We have to look at what can be achieved based on that legacy going forward. Thank you very much.
Challenging ideas, Dr. Klilo. I think we must call in the young chairperson of the Tony Leon Foundation and the Helen Ziller Foundation. Oh, you the young chairperson of your foundation. You're not that young anymore, yes. I remind myself, Rolf, of your and Madiba's civil society initiative in 2004, was it? 2001. The Civil Society Initiative. Maybe we must also look at those documents. But thank you very much for bringing all these very good ideas to us. We plan to have, just after the end of March, to have possible strategic planning. Those of you who want to make inputs there, you are more than welcome. I want Rolf refer to all the former politicians and current politicians who are here. And I think we must just recognize. We need not to analyze it or try to explain it, but let's just recognize the burning down of our parliamentary buildings. If one goes beyond the anger and the suspicion and everything, then you get to some heartache, sad feelings about that building that was destroyed. And let's recognize that. I think this building is too small, otherwise we could have borrowed them this building.
But we are at risk as well.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I think if I introduce Elita de Klerk to you, I would have liked to start to say Widow de Klerk. But if you saw her today in our meeting, you will agree with me that she's not down there. She's very high up here. powerful, influential. She's a network person. And the foundation has her as an asset. She put a mind to peace and reconciliation. And maybe we should put that out as a warning to those who do not want to have peace and reconciliation in this country. Elita, when I introduce you, it's both an honor and a privilege, and we would like to listen to you.
Hello, dear friends. Thank you for being here tonight. The 2nd of February is a special day, and in combination with the purchase of this building, it holds many promises. I would like to thank initially our donors who believed in us by donating the money to acquire this building. They gave it in good faith, and I hope we will not disappoint you with the work you entrusted us to do. We shall honor your trust. Times are difficult. 2022 has started with low expectations. The pandemic, the unemployment, the poverty, plus it is the year of the ANC election, which brings a lot of uncertainty. As FW's widow and partner in his life, I had the best tutor, listening to his speeches and discussing with him all current affairs. FW left a farewell video, which for him was important. So I want to honor him and take my cue from this farewell. He spoke about the Constitution. In this regard, we are planning to use an area in this building, the ground floor, to create a permanent exhibition that will narrate the events and different phases that took place towards the formation and transformation of our Constitution. The exhibition will incorporate video imagery and other user-friendly technology to help captivate audiences as they progress through the phases of the exhibit. When visitors leave, they will have a good understanding of how and why the Constitution was achieved. I remember when the foundation was founded, the constitutional side was for me very difficult to comprehend. At the time, I thought I wouldn't have to deal with it. Little did I know. By understanding our Constitution, we comprehend our rights and our responsibilities. At this point, the Constitution is under threat. There's a group of people who want to defy it. This group of people were part of the struggle to fight for their freedom in the apartheid years. Now they want to challenge the Constitution, but without it, there will be no freedom. But by defending the Constitution order, we address poverty, unemployment, and inequality. By setting these goals, we shall join forces, as we have done before with other institutions, and our voices will get amplified this way. The time has come in our democratic history that even we in civil society, all moderate voices, must stand together, irrespective of politics, and work together for the common good. We have to, otherwise our rainbow nation may suffer beyond repair. Now this brings me to my second point. I learned from my own personal story with grief. One has to go through the pain, then come out and start the healing process. When FW passed, there was a lot of hatred, which made me realize that this nation has not healed from its traumatic past. FW, in his farewell, gave a profound apology, knowing too well that even this would not be enough. But at times we need absolution for ourselves. I strongly believe that the Foundation should embark on projects focused on bringing justice. We need morality more than ever before. Acknowledging the pain, morality in its truest sense cannot be outsourced. It is about taking responsibility, not taking it away, not handing it away. All it needs is for us to think about the we, not just the I, Ubuntu. And immediately we change the tenor of our relationship. When we behave towards others with care and concern, sensitivity and tact, honesty and integrity, generosity and grace, forbearance and forgiveness, we start to become a different person, and such is the nature of reciprocity, justice for all, restorative justice. We would like to do projects which are humane and humble, one example of which is the project of the storytelling. For this, I and others in the Foundation shall go to the community, ask people at random to tell us their story about a certain topic. Let's say, how COVID has affected your life. Once we have heard and recorded these stories on film, with the participants' permission, we shall put edited clips on our website. This way, we shall help bring voice to the voiceless. People will not feel alone, as they will relate to these stories. They will identify to the problems and challenges and maybe potentials that they have heard. FW used to say, never despair about a problem. Problems are challenges to be accepted. We shall communicate our vulnerability, and this way we shall become strong. I sincerely hope you shall wish us well and strength and good luck for the tasks that we have ahead of us. And I can assure you that I am committed to also bring justice to FW's name where he was not fully understood, by continuing his legacy, which has become my life. Thank you.
Thank you, Elita. The last speaker is a friend of mine, Dr. Lucky Matabula, and he's a Rolf mentioned domestic unrest. That's where Lucky started his political career. A former activist, an academic. Lucky, would you say a word of thanks, please?
Thank you, Kutsie. Ek het nie my kleppe hier so gebring. Just relax. Thank you, Elita, for asking that I should say thank you. And the board, and the board for giving me this difficult task. But it's a short task. I'm asked to say thank you, and I'm saying thank you. But let me say something, that we are faced with a new challenge. As I thank you for coming here, I'll mention you at the end. Our challenge is we have to now start curating a legacy of a leader of South Africa whilst promoting what it stood for. So we have a responsibility of establishing a talking museum when most museums don't talk. And that's a very difficult task. It might be an opportunity that we can then have an opportunity to be interpretative of what it stood for and package it for society to understand what it stood for. It might be an opportunity. But it's also a risk that some in society may stand up and say, but that's not what it stood for. And this is a new challenge for us as a board. But today we have agreed that we're going to do that. And Rolf, when you spoke about 40-year-olds, we took a decision that our board should have 3 additional members and they should just be at that level, 40 and below, they must be young, so that we need to hear what people younger than us have said. I'm 14 years in the board, 12 to 14 years, and you can imagine 12 to 14 years ago, I was also in my early 40s, and ek was warm in the board. And I hope I made a contribution because of my age. But now I realize that I'm starting to understand certain things that I did not understand 10 years ago. So, Konrad Adenauer Foundation, thank you for your partnership. We value it, and we hope it doesn't stop here. I've seen Meneer Wiese here. We know the role that you are playing at the back end, and we thank you for all other contributions. We expect more. The challenge is bigger than when Meneer de Klerk was here. All other donors that are here, we're hoping that one day South Africa will use deliberately the leaders it had as tools for its soft power. Germany is doing that very well. You have the Friedrich Ebert Stiftung, the Konrad Adenauer, the Rosa Luxemburg, and all other foundations that are funded, part funded by government to do certain programs for them. We hope that one day the South African government will have a budget in its foreign relations budget or international relations budget to fund the FW de Klerk Foundation to do some of its soft power work in the world. And until that has happened, I will not rest as a person of trying to put influence. There's a story I want to tell and say goodbye and say dankie weer. I had a very wise father who left school at standard 3. This is what he used to say to me. He used to say, I used to go to the mountain with him. Then when we up the mountain, he'll say, if you have done your job very well and you have accompanied somebody to the top of the mountain, when that person celebrates to be in the top, he is not aware that you are also on top of the mountain. Because he sees you as somebody that has accompanied him. So I think we should give our nation a chance. It is not yet aware that de Klerk accompanied to the top of its mountain. That's why it's not aware to celebrate him. It only sees itself. So that's the wisdom I took from my father. And I think I want to tell you, Elita, that they are on the top of the mountain. We are on top of the mountain as a nation. But the person that actually started to say, you can't celebrate him because you think it was your journey to the mountain. And this person is there. You even show him. Say, kijk daar, ek is hierso. State of Onsesiso. So thank you, Madam Zille. We also thank you for your support. We know you have been here always. We don't think we don't notice all of you when you come to our functions. We notice you. In the board, we talk about you. Tony, we talk about you. All others that I can't mention your name, when we do a post-mortem in the next board meeting, we scanner you. We really scanner you with appreciation. Please don't give up on us. We appreciate you, and may God bless you, and we appreciate you, and thank you for coming. And the FW de Klerk Foundation will curate this legacy until it becomes one of the monuments that this country will recognize. We're not competing with the Mandela Foundation, but we think this foundation deserves an equivalent treatment in the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucky. Ladies and gentlemen, I must mention the apologies of Dr. Buthelezi. He's not well, and we hope him all of the best in his recovery. For me now, thank you for the wonderful audience you were. Thank you to the speakers, including Lucky. We're 5 minutes ahead of our schedule and just enough time to go downstairs and to enjoy the refreshments with your friends and with us. Thank you very much.